Welcome back to Small Ball, and while you're here, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another video. Today, we'll be discussing the Indianapolis Colts wide receiver position going into the 2024 NFL season. Over the last couple years, it has been a little difficult to judge this position group. You have the likes of Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs being kind of the headliners of that group. Michael Pittman Jr., no doubt a terrific NFL wide receiver, although there are questions if he is that number one guy. He is no doubt a very, very, very good wide receiver, but is he that number one wide receiver that is going to just take over games, and have we seen him take over games? We'll discuss that a little bit today. We'll talk about Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, is he going to become what people thought he could? Is he going to be a deep threat? Is he going to be that vertical threat down the field that the Colts have missed the last couple of years? His second season, sophomore season, did not go as planned, but neither did the quarterback situation. How much do you put on him versus how much do you put on the environment around him? And then we'll hit the new guy on the block, Josh Downs, who turned in a really solid rookie season, crafty slot type wide receiver, 5'9", nothing compared to the 6'4" Michael Pittman and the 6'3" Alec Pierce. But he gives diversity to that wide receiver group that it's been missing. I mean, we haven't really had a wide receiver like that in Indianapolis since T.Y. Hilton, who had that ability to just get open, find the holes in that slot position. And again, kind of reminiscent of T.Y. Hilton in the early days of his Colts tenure. Pretty good punt returner. Took over punt returning duties throughout the season. And again, this is a pretty thin group right now for the Indianapolis Colts, but as they head into the offseason, we'll see what they do. And I do think they will make some additions. There have been rumblings connected to all sorts of superstars. Inherently, I think because of potential disgruntlement in Philadelphia, A.J. Brown's name has been thrown out there because of the Steichen connection and the great year he had with Shane Steichen. And then also reports out of Bleacher Report, I believe, proposing a deal that would send Stephon Diggs to the Indianapolis Colts. At least smoke around the league that the Colts may be in the market for a marquee wide receiver to give their young quarterback and their young core an opportunity to compete in the next couple of years. Remember, if your name's not Patrick Mahomes, one of the very few ways you can compete in this league is on a rookie quarterback contract. And even you saw with Mahomes this year, with lack of weapons and lack of salary flexibility, it can hurt. Right? I mean, if you don't have that number one wide receiver, if you don't have that go-to guy, I mean, it's much better to be in a situation with a young quarterback and experienced wide receivers than experienced quarterback and young wide receivers. I mean, quarterbacks can make wide receivers. We saw that in Indianapolis for years underneath Peyton Manning, but that doesn't mean that that is the way to go. I mean, the Colts only won one Super Bowl, went to two during his tenure. You did have Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison throughout that, so that's not to say the Colts did not have weapons, but you had guys like Austin Collie, Anthony Gonzalez that rolled through that organization that were solid players. Brandon Stokely, another guy. These were solid wide receivers, but nothing flashy, not top tier guys. Again, as you kind of look at what will the Colts need, it seems like they need a marquee wide receiver. It seems like they need a, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison type receiver. I think Pittman Jr. is right below those two. I don't think he's in that top group. And again, when we look at the NFL season coming up, you have Anthony Richardson returning. What are they going to add? They need to add talent around him, talent in that wide receiver group. Richardson is not going to be the guy that's going to fit it in the tightest of windows, but he's going to be the guy with a big cannon. So if you got that wide receiver that can be that vertical threat, get open down the field, you're going to have a quarterback that's going to be willing to throw it down the field. And that gets to a big question mark in the offseason. There's really two I want to hit on. Pittman, who knows what he's going to do? He says he wants to test out free agency. If Pittman does not return, I think that will be a strong indication that the Indianapolis Colts are going to go out and get that marquee weapon. Now, let's assume Pittman returns. Pittman has been often categorized as a kind of high 2, low 1 type wide receiver. He's not a bona fide number one wide receiver, despite the fact he has been the number one wide receiver on the Colts. Well, you can't have Pittman out on an island. And so that leaves the other two potential wide receiver options on the Colts right now. One is Alec Pierce, who had, again, underwhelming sophomore campaign, and Josh Downs. The question I have about Alec Pierce, as much as he seems like a hardworking, solid guy, is he ran more vertical downfield than any other wide receiver in the league this year. And you have to wonder how much of the fact that he had Gardner Minshew as quarterback hindered his success at being that downfield threat. Gardner wasn't exactly known for having the strongest arm in the league or going to be the guy that throws the 60-yard pass down the field and hits the wide receiver. He's just not that guy. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of slant routes. I think that's why we saw some success with Josh Downs with Gardner Minshew, more so than Alec Pierce. But if you look at 2 years ago in Alec Pierce's rookie campaign, that he was a guy, Matt Ryan, independent of what you think of Matt Ryan and his very short stint in Indianapolis, he wasn't exactly, Phillip Rivers for the fan base. Matt Ryan loved Alec Pierce. This is a guy that had been around a lot of really good wide receivers. This isn't, somebody coming from exactly a poverty franchise who's going into Indianapolis saying, oh, look at this guy. No, this is a guy that was used to Julio Jones, and he took a liking to Alec Pierce. And even when you heard games that Matt Ryan was calling this year in the booth, you could hear his admiration for Alec Pierce. So the question is, going into year 3, he stays in Indy. I don't think there's a question about that. But does he improve with a quarterback, assuming Anthony Richardson can stay healthy, that will throw the ball down the field and let it fly? That's the question. There's no question as to whether or not he is a athletic guy. We know he's athletic. He's big. He's strong. He's fast. But is he a difference maker in the NFL? And on this Colts roster, even if he is a low 2, high 3 option, that still leaves a massive gap for the Colts. If he's not a 2 and Pittman's not a borderline 1, they're going to need talent. They're going to need skill on the outside. And if Pierce can't be that guy, I don't know if you can gamble with that. You might be able to say, listen, this is Anthony Richardson's first full year in theory. If he gets out there and he competes, that's great. We can take another year of Alec Pierce, see how Pierce does in this offense in year 2. Assuming that Anthony Richardson comes back, Alec Pierce does play halfway decent, well, you're in an interesting spot because this team last year was about, handful of plays away from the playoffs. They essentially played in a playoff game. I said essentially, I know they didn't. But Alec Pierce, is he a differential piece on this offense? If you have a better wide receiver taking those reps than Alec Pierce, and there's a lot out there. It's not an insult to Alec Pierce, but he's just not in that top category. If you had a very, very solid 1-2 punch of Pittman and someone else, man, that's an offense that's going to be scary. And you combine that with a speedy Josh Downs coming out of the slot position, that could be good. Again, a lot of this hangs on, does Pittman re-sign with the Indianapolis Colts? There's no doubt that Michael Pittman has been a fantastic member of this team. And I wouldn't even, there's a potential that Michael Pittman Jr. is incredibly undervalued because of the fact he has had so many quarterbacks. I think his rookie season was with Phillip Rivers, right? Phil Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, Sam Ehlinger, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew. I'm sure I'm missing one or two. I mean, that is a lot of turnover for a wide receiver. And for a guy to have that amount of turnover and inconsistency at the quarterback position and still put up numbers year after year after year and still be in the conversation of, is this guy a borderline 2 or 1? I mean, goodness gracious. He had what, 4, 5 quarterbacks, 6 quarterbacks over the course of 3 years? I mean, the fact the guy is in the conversation of being a number 1 in that situation is an indication he is a damn good wide receiver. The question remains, is he the guy that you can put as the number 1 on your wide receiver chart and just say, we're in a good spot? And I think there will always be a question because he's a grinder. He's not flashy. He's not going to be throwing up the peace sign as he's running down the field. But he might throw a haymaker across the helmet of a cornerback every now and then. I mean, he's got that fire in him. So again, the wide receiver spot, Pittman, Pierce, Downs. Who you got? Who you like? I like Downs. Good slot option. Okay, let's assume you got that position kind of taken up. You'll find somebody to compete in that spot, but it looked like Downs is that guy or good enough for that guy. Downs, Pittman, good. Is Pierce the third piece? I'm not convinced at the moment. And it doesn't help that despite the fact that he may have not gotten all the opportunities, when he did get the opportunities, sometimes he just screwed up, had some costly drops. I mean, it's just stuff where you want the guy to succeed, but for the franchise, do they need to go out and get a good wide receiver? CJ Stroud looks pretty good. Trevor Lawrence, pretty good. Who knows what Tennessee's going to do? The point is, all of a sudden, the AFC South is no joke anymore. Time to invest in that wide receiver room. Very rarely do you have offenses that can go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, without having weapons on the outside. Pittman is a weapon. How good of a weapon? It's a question mark. Pierce, it's a question mark if he's a weapon. And if you've got a 2, 3, 4-year window here with a young Anthony Richardson, this core, man, you got to make an investment on the outside. I mean, the homegrown talent, yeah, that's nice. Homegrown talent combined with an injection of talent from some other team of a superstar caliber player, it's worthwhile. Patrick Mahomes, who just won another Super Bowl, has Travis Kelce. Yeah, the offense was not as good because they didn't have Tyreek Hill anymore, but he still had Travis Kelce, the go-to guy. You look at the other side, the 49ers, goodness gracious, their weapons are unbelievable. So unbelievable. By the way, not a shot at Brock Purdy, but so unbelievable that Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, was able to take them to the Super Bowl and into overtime. Weapons matter. You got a young quarterback. Look at the 49ers. You really think you're going to compete in the AFC? Set the AFC South alone. You're going to compete in the AFC, and you think you're going to go take on Patrick Mahomes without taking some gambles on targets on the outside, making a real investment. You're not. You're just not going to compete. And this has been a concern, which is Ballard has taken a conservative approach. I appreciate Ballard's approach to being a GM. Drafting Anthony Richardson is not a conservative approach. That was, if we're going to compete in the AFC, we've got to swing big. Anthony Richardson, that's a big swing. If you're going to go in, go in. You can't halvesy this. I mean, you got to go in. So I'm expecting investment on the outside. I'm expecting some weapons to be added in Indianapolis. And I'm expecting that Alec Pierce is going to be the guy that has to take a step back in a role. I really think it's going to be a very solid wide receiver. I don't know if it's going to be an elite wide receiver, but I think they're going to bring in a very good wide receiver. Alec Pierce is going to kind of step into that 4 role type thing. And again, I mean, hopefully the guy can play special teams. I know that sounds bad, but oh man, just not seeing a lot right now out of him. And he's young, has had the same turnover issues at quarterback. I mean, that guy's had 5 quarterbacks in 2 years. That's a lot. So I'm not completely out on Alec Pierce, but the Colts have a window. And the Colts have a window in an incredibly tough conference where they've got to take down a dynasty. A dynasty. We know how hard it was for Peyton Manning to take on a dynasty in New England. Good luck taking on Kansas City, being real contenders in the AFC with Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce. You're just not going to. It's not a shot at those two guys. They're not bad in a vacuum. But the offense needs more weapons. It's as simple as that. And if you're going to compete, you need to go in and invest in those weapons. It's the time. The time isn't always. The time, you don't always have to invest in those things. But right now, it's an arms race. It would be wise to. Let us know in the comments what you thought about the Colts wide receiver position. Who are they going to add? Is it Stephon Diggs? It's out there. It's out there. I don't know if it will, but it's out there. I've heard Jerry Jeudy been thrown around before. So there are a lot of options that are out there. But folks, they're just rumors. They're just projections. Chris Ballard is a man that's going to pull the trigger. And we know one thing about Chris Ballard is he's going to be patient and he probably won't overpay. And that's a tricky thing when it comes to wide receivers because they tend to get overpaid. Say this too. Chris Ballard, end of your press conference goes, hey, wide receiver market's a little bit like gas. Doesn't matter if gas is expensive, you still need gas. So it sounds like he's going to be willing to pay. He knows the advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie deal. He knows that. He's a smart guy. This is what he's wanted. If you don't have an Andrew Luck, if you don't have an elite quarterback, you need to go young and go in around the young guy. Anthony Richardson's dynamic enough. It's going to open up holes in the defense. It really is. You got Jonathan Taylor. You got one or two potential good pieces on the outside. Give me 3 good pieces or give me an elite piece and 2 good pieces. We need more weapons on the outside. We need more separation. We need dynamic players that will take over games. We don't have that right now. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video. Thanks for listening to Small Ball.